Good afternoon, actually good morning. It's Friday, trying to make the weekend start a little sooner. I did not mean to say that. Good morning, everyone. This is Stephen Gentile from Tennessee Higher Education Commission. I am joined today by my colleagues on the fiscal team, Crystal Collins and Taylor Odell. They'll be providing some background support for me as we make our way through this PowerPoint presentation. Some quick housekeeping notes. First of all, this is being recorded and will be online as soon as possible on our website dedicated to this RFP and this grant. We'll send that out early next week. As questions come in either today or over the next week, we will develop a frequently asked questions sheet and share that online as well. But there is a little component of the module in front of you that will allow you to type in your questions today during this presentation. And as you do so, we will answer them as we can, or we might save some time toward the end to answer questions. We'll see what type of questions we are getting. But thank you all for joining today's webinar. This is again the Drive to 55 Project Capacity Fund Grant Technical Assistance webinar, a mouthful to be sure, but we are going to go over today. We'll review how this grant came about, its purpose, the details behind it, review how you may go about applying for this grant, and again address the process and timeline for the grant. I mentioned our website dedicated to this grant and our RFP. It is the one you see right here. There you can find the RFP and associated budget items as well. So a quick overview. Many, if not most of you or all of you, have heard about the Drive to 55 challenge. This is Governor Haslam's challenge to all of Tennessee, to our higher education institutions, all citizens, to reach 55% of college degree or certificate adult attainments by 2025. And this has been an effort that has really permeated all of our efforts at Tennessee Higher Education Commission. I know at TBR, UT, at the institutions, not everything we do is directly related to Drive to 55, but everything definitely has Drive to 55 cemented onto our minds about how to actually go about getting to 55%. So much so that last year, over the summer, we had a task force on higher education infrastructure and capacity. And so it was a committee brought together, hosted at THIP, but convened by the governor to actually analyze the various components of how we distribute capital money, capital maintenance, capital outlay, disclosed projects. It had members of government on the committee. It also had higher education representatives as well from the system. And one of the discussion points was how can we align our capital outlay process, that process of distributing money to our campuses to develop new academic buildings, for instance. How can we better align that process with Drive to 55 to help institutions, for instance, ramp up programs to produce more certificates, for instance, to help meet Drive to 55. And from those discussions, last year in November, we recommended to our commission, and the commission approved this grant, the Drive to 55 Project Capacity Fund Grant. It was our #1 capital outlay priority. And we initially recommended $10 million, then went to the governor, and the governor approved that recommendation and raised it to $20 million. And by the time this made its way through General Assembly, the grant increased to $24.25 million. We were thrilled to have this recommendation increase 2.5 times. It shows the commitment from the government, from higher education, to Drive 55 as well as to the specific grant. So some details about this grant. It is $24.25 million. With that said, there are no limits placed on the size of a grant. We decided to leave that up to how the process rolls out itself. So if you're thinking about, well, what is the minimum, what is the max that I can request, there is no limit, except for there is a cap on the total funding. However, we are hoping to distribute this grant to as many priorities states as possible. This is something that we want to use to address different needs. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the money you're going to ask for through this grant process. The money will be dispersed not through THIP, but through finance and administration. It will follow the standard protocol that is placed on all capital outlay projects, where The systems go in front of the State Building Commission at different steps throughout the project's implementation. So once a project is awarded by THIP, announced and awarded in November, it will then be dispersed based on the finance and administration schedule. And finally, we are limiting one proposal per institution or TCAT campus. This is a little nuanced, so I want to go into this a little bit. So there are 27 TCAT campuses. If we receive one proposal from each of the TCAT campuses, that's great. We also understand that there might be other entities that are hoping to create additional TCAT campuses across the state. That proposal process does not interfere with the proposal process of the existing TCAT campuses. So we may receive 27 TCAT campus proposals, and in addition, proposals for new campus TCAT campuses. So I just want to outline that here now, and I'll also put that in the frequently asked question component of our website as well. So eligibility requirements, the public community colleges, public universities must be the lead applicant. We can also receive applications from non-formula units, and non-formula units, examples of those, agricultural units in the state, or medical schools such as UT Health Science Center may also apply for this grant. All TCAT-related proposals must come through the Office of Colleges of Applied Technology. As an example, if TCAT Nashville has a proposal, they can work on that proposal, but they must submit that proposal through Vice Chancellor King's office, and they are aware of that as well. Every proposal must classify the project as one of two categories: program expansion and new capital construction major renovation. If you read through the RFP, you'll see these are actually treated as two completely different proposals, and there are two different scoring rubrics associated with each of these classifications. So program expansion. This would entail the purchase of new equipment, for instance, to expand a program or a couple of programs, perhaps a renovation, a small renovation of an existing facility to expand an existing program. The other category, new capital construction, major renovation. Think of this as new buildings or large-scale renovations to current facilities that change the function, use, capacity of those facilities. This may also include acquisition of property or acquisition of land on which you will build a new building. This very much follows the traditional capital outlay process. However, it's intended to fall within the current budget. And finally, this is very important, and you'll see this in the scoring rubric if you read the RFP, the proposal must address how this will support Drive to 55 efforts to increase post-secondary credentials that do align with the workforce needs. And we'll talk more about how we specifically would like that to be done in the proposal later in the presentation. There are 6 different sections that we will go into each of them. You see them there on the slide. I want to point out that we do have a page limit that is 12 pages in total for this proposal. But as you read through the RFP, you'll note that there are some things that we may require that are additional. Those additional items will never count toward your 12-page limit. And so if you read through, there'll be an italicized notes saying this will not count toward your 12-page limit. Just wanted to put that out there right now. But going over what we do require, the cover page. The cover page is the first item you'll see in the appendix dedicated to the layout of the proposal. This will require the fiscal agent signature, a project manager and primary contact as well, that we will be in touch about that project. If you are a TCAT, this contact can be coming from the TCAT campus, but it may also be coming from Vice Chancellor King's office. That's up for you guys to determine on your end. Project abstract, just straightforward, a half-page summary that we will put online on our website should your project be awarded as an example of what we are awarding. It will, in that abstract, you must also state what that classification is, just so we know on the front end, again, one of those 2 classifications. We're also asking that you tell us exactly how much money you're requesting in that abstract, just so we know when we first look at that proposal. So project proposal, in this PowerPoint, this is going to cover a few slides. Think of this as the overall description of your project. Again, you are classifying for us. You're classifying for us whether it's program expansion or a new capital construction major renovation. I'm actually going to hold right here for 1 second and answer a question coming from University of Memphis. The website that we are asking for, where the RFP is related to you guys. I'm going to go back a few slides here. It's at our THIP website, the Drive to 55 Project Capacity Fund Grant RFP. I'll stop here right now. I'm not sure if you can actually click on this link through your module, but we can send this out afterward, after this presentation. And there it is. This is what it looks like for you guys. You can see the different project forms. This is where our actual presentation will go for you guys too. And there's the RFP. All right, so back to the project proposal. You can classify it as either program expansion or new capital construction major renovation. If it is a program expansion, we want you to identify what the academic or technical program is that it will be expanding. This could be multiple programs, but we just want you to detail that. If you're purchasing equipment, please be specific of what you are purchasing, the type, total units, and cost of that equipment to be purchased. And then also, if you're renovating an existing facility, tell us how that space is going to be altered, repurposed, or improved. If the project proposal is a new capital construction, a major renovation, we are asking you to, again, identify what programs will occupy that new space. If it's a new facility, tell us about the details, like how large it's going to be, the square footage with that. For the major renovation, and it's changing function, use, or capacity, we're asking you to explain exactly what will be changing for that. And here's a detail that's important. If you're acquiring property, a part of the THIP process, or the State Building Commission process, is that if you're acquiring property that's not, again, in your actual current property, we are asking that that has been identified in your institution's master plan. And there's a land acquisition plan in each institution master plan that has been identified, says, hey, these are properties right here that we think are important. If you get an opportunity, acquire that property. If that has been identified in the land acquisition plan of that master plan, we ask that you verify that. You include a copy of the map that shows that. We understand there might be properties that have not been identified in the master plan. At this part in the process, that's okay. But by the time it gets to the State Building Commission process, we will need to have reviewed and made an amendment to the master plan that identifies that property as an acquisition. And I'm happy to answer questions on this one-on-one, because I believe this will be nuanced for different types of people. I got a question that asked, are multiple programs okay? Yes, multiple programs that are expanded or occupy new space, that is okay. I also got a question that says, can multiple institutions submit a single joint proposal? Yes, that's something that can be done. That would represent your institution and that institution's one proposal. But yes, that would be okay. Actually, yeah, Crystal just gave me a good note. And it's actually on this slide right here. I'm going to skip to number 2. If there are proposed collaboration or partnerships with a local workforce or economic development agency, Chamber of Commerce, or another institution, we ask that you include letters of support from those partnering parties. So to get at that question about, yes, we can, if you are working with someone else, that's fine, but we just need support, evidence of support. I do want to note that partnership is not required or expected in this proposal. So if you're thinking we're not considering partnering with someone else, that is not a requirement of this proposal. But there are others out there who may want to actually partner. We just need that evidence. Back to the first bullet point here. After the completion of the project, there will be inherent ongoing costs for the operation of the machines, for instance, or there might be staff who are working in certain new facilities. We want to know what the estimated annual operating costs will be that will come to that institution. And finally, include a timeline from January 2017 through the completion of the project with major activities and milestones predicted. We understand things might change. We require a progress report, and in the RFP you'll see that's listed as December 1, 2017. How the capital project is progressing. Some will be complete by then, and that would be fine and good. We'll have that reported in that progress report. Other projects will not be complete by December 1, 2017. We understand that. So we may require additional progress reports towards the completion of that project. Next, to the next component of the grant, the proposal, Drive to 55 goals. You'll see that there are only 2 bullet points here listed in this slide. This is actually a very important part of the proposal. If you see in the scoring rubric, a lot of emphasis is on this component. Being the Drive to 55 Project Capacity Fund grant, we want to know how does this project relate to Drive to 55's efforts. Specifically, how will it increase higher education attainment, and how will those increased certificates or degrees or what have you, how will those address regional and state workforce needs and skill set deficiencies? We have listed in the RFP several data sources for you that are preferred that we hope you consult when you're addressing the Drive 55 goals. Here's an example of one, THIP's Master Plan for Tennessee Post-Secondary Education. And you'll find this link within the PDF that we sent out of the RFP. You may use, in addition to these sources, other sources. You're not limited to these preferred data sources, but again, they are preferred. Project budget. There are many of you who have heard of the DV7T forms. DV7T forms are general project cost descriptions that accompany every capital outlay, every capital maintenance, disclosed projects that we review and that also go on to State Building Commission. These are, I say here, the spreadsheets are here. That link, by the way, is the same as the RFP link that I discussed earlier. There are 2 different forms, one for UT, another from TBR. And these are forms that are created by the systems, though they largely get the same information across. But we are requiring you, if you're a TCAT or a TBR university or community college, to complete that DV7T form from TBR. If you're a UT institution, to complete UT's institution. And I'm going to deviate from the presentation just a little bit and show you an example of the DV7T form and what we do require. So this is TBR's DV7T form. We play no role in the creation of this form. There are inherent calculations here, and there are instructions within. All of the instructions are coming from TBR. For instance, up here at the top, if you're typing where it ain't blue, you shouldn't be. That's a TBR instruction. I think it's very explicit, and it tells you what to do. If you have any questions about how to fill this form out, please contact, I believe, Dick Tracy at TBR. He should be able to help you. When all is said and done, it's the value that's right here in E41, and this corresponds with UT's DV7T form. E41 is the one that you are requesting for this grant. You'll notice at the bottom here, there are many other tabs. Here's the DV7T. There are other tabs as well. We, for this proposal, are requiring the DV7T tab only. However, TBR or UT may actually want you to complete the rest, that's their protocol. And we are leaving that to them and for you guys to determine if you need to fill out the rest of these tabs. But for our proposal, it's DV70 that matters. And you can submit these as the spreadsheet. So go online and download the spreadsheet and submit the spreadsheet along with your proposal, and we'll take that to complete your proposal. All right, back to the project budget here. So we got through this first three. In addition to the DV70, we would like for you to include a letter of validation from the system that says that they've reviewed the costs associated with your project and they concur. The systems have better ways of determining that than we will on our end, so that's why we're requesting that letter of validation. And you may also be aware that in the capital outlay process, we require a match from the institution. For universities, a 25% match up to the first $70 million of a capital outlay project, for instance. Projects that are approved through this grant process and are awarded through this grant process will not require a match. There is no expected institutional match for this process. The next and final section of the proposal is sustainability. Again, once this capital project is complete, there will be additional costs associated with operating the facility. We want to understand how you plan to use your current resources or intended other resources to support and maintain those operating costs. As an example, if you're purchasing equipment, provide a detailed plan for maintenance, housing, and upkeep of equipment. We want to be sure, and the state government wants to be sure, that this will continue to meet and address Drive to 55 goals going forward. I've got a question that says about the letter of intent. I will answer that in just 1 minute. Let me get to the timeline. But real quick, the selection of the awards. So when your proposals are submitted, and they're submitted by October 7, Friday, October 7, 4 p.m., we will put those proposals together and present them to the Workforce Subcabinet. The Workforce Subcabinet is made up of members of government, including the Department of Economic Development, for instance, or Department of Labor, Tennessee, also made up of higher education representatives. The members of the Workforce Subcabinet will be reviewing the proposals and scoring the proposals based on the two classifications rubrics. Those scores will be ranked, presented to our commission, and the commission will use those ranked scores in combination with selection criteria to determine the final awards. So let's focus on that selection criteria component. At the July commission meeting, July 20th, the commission will determine what the selection criteria will be. And these are criteria that are not specific to proposals. They are, for instance, and this is just an example that the commission will be deciding, perhaps the award should have an equal representation from across the state's grand divisions or from across the different sectors of higher education. Those are going to be determined at the July 20th meeting, and when that is determined, we will email those out to all of those who've said that they will intend to submit a proposal. They will use that selection criteria, marry that with the ranked scores to actually finalize who is getting the awards. The commission has the authority to approve any modifications to the proposed budgets, and the commission will announce the awards at its fall quarterly meeting, which is in November. Basic timeline. So we're already on July 8th of this technical assistance webinar, so going down to that third row. Next Friday is the July 15th deadline for the notice of intent, and these are letters of intent coming from the institutions. In those letters of intent, we need to know the intended correspondents for us. Who are we going to be communicating with for that project? Who's going to be the project lead as well? We do not make a specific requirement for type of program or title of program or project. That does not need to be decided. This is just a waving your hand in the air saying, we intend to submit a proposal of some sort. If you're a TCAT institution, you need to send your letter of intent to the Office of College of Applied Technology, to Vice Chancellor King's office before that deadline, because they will be sending directly to us all of your letters of intent. Now, I was speaking with Dr. Carol Puryear today about that, so she understands that as well. This goes for those who are proposing a new TCAT campus. We need for you to be working directly with Vice Chancellor King's office to submit that notice of intent, as well as the grant proposal, which is due Friday, October 7th by 4 p.m. Central. Those will be emailed in to me. TCATs will be coming from Vice Chancellor King's office. We will review, the Workforce Subcabinet will review the proposals, and the Commission will announce the grant awards again at its fall quarterly meeting on November 17th. We will finalize contracts. Grants will be available to disperse at some point in January. There's not a final date on that. And when I say available to disperse, what I mean by that is, again, following the protocol of Finance Administration and State Building Commission, how that is determined and how it's dispersed is based on that protocol, not ours. And I mentioned earlier the December 1st progress report that is due. And if the project is not complete by then, there may be more progress reports due from you guys. So that's the general presentation. We do have some questions coming in, and some that I skipped over to answer at the end specifically. Actually, yeah, Crystal Collins is going to answer some of the questions.
So there was a question earlier in the presentation about whether or not leased property would qualify for acquisition, and our feelings about leased property, it's not forebodden in the RFP to identify leased property. I would assume that would be a program expansion, a project. I will say that it's not in the RFP or in the scoring rubric that leased property would be given preference or that purchased property would be given preference over leased property. But just keep in mind when you're identifying areas for program expansion or construction that the state would be investing money in the program or the physical building and would probably want to own the property. But again, leased property is not forebodden from being included the way that the RFP is written currently. Another question was, if you have more than one institution or you have institutions that are working together for an application and one happens to be a TCAT, do you have to go through the office of the technical colleges in order to submit? And the way that process works is it depends on who your lead institution is. So if your lead institution is a community college, then no. If the lead institution is the TCAT, then yes. In the long run, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because you will have to have a letter of verification, either from TBR if you're a letter of validation, either from TBR if you're the community college reporting, or from the TCAT main office if you're the TCAT. So that's those previous questions. So going specifically to, again, a TCAT, if a TCAT is the lead institution that is responding to this RFP, that TCAT has to go through James King's office. So if the TCAT is the lead institution submitting the proposal, you do have to go through James King's office. If you're, again, I mean, I think it doesn't matter who the lead organization is if you're doing a program expansion or a new capital construction. If it's more than one institution, you just need to pick one, and that institution is going to be responsible, just like if they were going through the capital outlay process through the State Building Commission. So obviously, we would prefer that both institutions are involved pretty heavily.
I would say that if a new capital construction project is going to be a partnership between two institutions, think about in the long run who will be sustaining the operating costs of that facility. If it's going to be primarily one institution over another, then that institution should be the one as the lead applicant.
Also, where the new building is going to be located. If the new building is located on one of the institution's existing campuses, that institution should be the lead organization. A
question about the webinar. Will the webinar be available to listen to again? It will be on our website, and we will send out that link as soon as it is available sometime next week. I got a question about the letter of intent. Again, the letter of intent, basic information saying that you do intend, your institution does intend to apply. If you know already that you intend to apply with another partnering institution, please go ahead and say that. For instance, if you are Chattanooga State and you know that you'll be working with TCAT Chattanooga, please tell us that in that letter of intent so that we will know. Basically, for the letter of intent, we just need to know on our end what to expect and what questions to field between now and October. If in that partnership you are TCAT Chattanooga, it would be helpful for us to receive a letter of intent from you directly as well. Could the grant award be applied to an institution's match on a capital outlay project? No, it cannot be, specifically because the grant match is supposed to be from institutional resources, and this is coming as a state resource. And again, yes, we will send out and post the PowerPoint. I'm sorry, actually a question about the PowerPoint specifically. Yes, we will post this PowerPoint as well as the webinar online, and we will email it out as well. I understand that there'll be probably more questions about the whole partnering aspect. Please feel free to email, call me, and we will work through that. I believe the answers to those questions will be nuanced based on what type of partnership you are expecting with another institution, but we will field a response as we receive them and working with the systems as well. The letter of intent does not need to include an estimated cost. No. If you have an estimated cost, sure, you can, but it is not expected. I'm scrolling through the questions again to make sure we've answered as much as we can. Okay. I'll hold for a couple more minutes, or a minute, to see if there are any more questions coming in, but right now there are not. Thank you everyone for participating today. We look forward to reviewing the letters of intent as they come in and putting the proposals together for the workforce subcabinet. A question: could a grant award be applied to an institutionally funded project already under construction or recently completed? I think the person who asked that, if you can be in touch with me specifically about what that means. I mean, this specific money needs to go to an expansion of a current facility or the creation of a current facility that is underway. But that your question may have some more complexities to it, specific to it, that I would want to address one-on-one. Does the letter of intent need to include the classification for the project? No, it does not. It does not need to include the classification. But if you know that information, feel free to put that in there. Sure. But it's not required. Basically, the letter of intent is just basically what it sounds like. You're letting us know that you intend to apply by October 7th.
so that we know how many institutions are still thinking about applying.
All right, so this, oh, got another question.
So we got a question of whether or not we will publicly announce how many institutions submitted a letter of intent. Generally, we don't do that just because, again, we could have 49 or 50 entities submit a letter of intent, and then we only receive 10 completed RFPs. So the letter of intent is mostly for us. It's not necessarily an indication of the success of the program or interest in the program. So normally we don't do that.
I got a statement said, "Tell whomever, thank you for this opportunity." We will do so. Again, we were pleasantly surprised to have this increase from $10 million to over $24 million. Certainly a special thanks to the governor himself for convening the group that thought of this, for raising it, but also thanks to many other people who played a big role in getting this to where it is right now. Okay, thank you guys so much. We're going to go ahead and end this presentation. We will send out the webinar next week. Again, thank you for participating, and if you ever have any questions, there's my contact information. Thank you so much.